He thought he was only fighting a snowstorm, but Navy SEAL Ethan Miller was about to face something far worse. In the frozen silence of an abandoned container yard, he found Officer Olivia Brooks, tied to a steel post, barely conscious, while 3 K9s lay beside her, their bodies shaking as the cold stole their strength. No backup, no time, only a race against the storm and the darkness behind it. What began as a simple choice to help became a battle against something far more sinister. Stay with me. Like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of courage, hope, and the miracles that appear when a single act of bravery refuses to surrender. Snow swallowed Denver's industrial outskirts in a blinding blizzard, erasing all edges and colors until the world became nothing but white turbulence and howling wind. Stacked shipping containers, towering like rusted monoliths, rattled under violent gusts. In that storm of needles and ice stood Officer Olivia Brooks, wrists zip-tied behind a steel post. 32, tall and athletic, the kind of woman whose posture alone communicated authority even before she spoke. Her dark chestnut hair, usually tied tight, now plastered to her cheek like frozen threads. Snow coated her lashes, and her breath escaped in thin, irregular clouds, barely visible in the storm's fury. Her uniform, once crisp, was stiff with frost. The reflective badge on her chest was the only thing that hadn't surrendered to white. Nearby, pressed weakly against her legs, were 3 K9 partners, Rex, Bolt, and Scout. Olivia didn't have the strength to check on them, but she felt minimal movement. Rex's tremor against her shin, Bolt's faint shifting of weight, Scout's tiny attempts to burrow deeper toward her warmth. They instinctively huddled together, bodies curled, trying to protect their unconscious handler from the storm. Olivia tried to fight the drowsiness, the tempting, heavy fog that hypothermia brings. She clung to fading thoughts. Don't sleep. If I sleep, they die too. Her eyes drifted shut. Wind screamed against metal, drowning every rational thought. Footsteps crunched somewhere behind her. Not rushed, not lost, but steady, purposeful. A silhouette cut through the snow. He emerged not like a savior, but like someone who'd been in fights against much worse than weather. Ethan Miller, 35, 6'3", carried the kind of build that you only get from years of military training. Broad shoulders, powerful arms, a physique shaped by push-ups, rucksack marches, and firefights. His dark blonde hair was damp from ice melt, and his jaw was shadowed with stubble, the rough kind grown from days without sleep rather than fashion. His eyes, steel blue, direct, were the eyes of someone who could measure distance, escape routes, and threats all at once without moving a muscle. Ethan was a Navy SEAL on his way back toward base when whiteout conditions forced him to abandon the highway. Most men would have stayed in their vehicle and prayed. Ethan never learned to sit still and wait for rescue. He was the rescue. He carried a compact survival pack, thermal blanket, chem warmers, multi-tool, water. Years in war zones had taught him to never depend on luck. The faint glint of Olivia's badge was what caught him, just a shard of reflection bouncing back against the beam of his tactical flashlight. That was all it took. He moved. Not cautiously, directly. When he reached her, he slid to one knee. A quick assessment, zip-tied, severe hypothermia, fading pulse. Not dead, not yet. He sliced the restraints with his multi-tool, catching her before she collapsed. Into the snow. She weighed nearly nothing, as if the cold had hollowed her out. He dragged her into the narrow windbreak between 2 containers, dropped to his pack, and snapped a thermal blanket open with precise, efficient movements. He tucked it around her, wrapped 2 chem warmers against her torso where heat mattered most, and cupped his hands around her face for a second, checking responsiveness. Nothing. He shifted to the dogs. He didn't register their names, ages, or breeds, only their condition. Breathing shallow, dangerously slow. He positioned them tightly around Olivia, aligning their bodies against hers, letting shared heat do what science demanded. His pulse remained steady, not fast, not rattled. Ethan had been under enemy fire with worse odds. Just as he reached for the radio clipped to Olivia's vest, part of his mind gave a small scream of anger, the private buried part of him that hated cruelty. He pressed the transmit button. Static. He adjusted his grip. Officer down. Severe hypothermia. Need immediate assistance. More static. The battery light flickered, starved by cold, but somewhere far away in the dispatch center, a technician frowned at a strange signal spike. Ethan leaned closer to Olivia, voice low. You're not dying here. Her eyelids twitched. He hooked the radio to his vest so it stayed upright for a stronger transmission angle. Then, light cut across them, not from above, from the side. A beam of headlights pushed through the blizzard, sweeping slowly across the maze of containers. Ethan turned his head slightly, barely moving his body. The truck wasn't approaching, it was searching. The light slid across the snow, climbing the containers, tracing the exact post Olivia had been tied to just minutes earlier. It lingered. Ethan's muscles tightened. No tremor, no panic, just readiness. He lowered Olivia and moved half a step forward, a silent barricade between her and the approaching threat. The headlights abruptly shut off. The engine idled for 2 seconds, long enough for Ethan to know this wasn't coincidence, then faded into the storm, leaving only white silence. Someone didn't abandon her. Someone came back to make sure she stayed dead. Snow swirled hard again, filling the silence. Ethan stayed still, listening. His breathing remained controlled. The part of him trained for war, the part that evaluated threat vectors, terrain, odds, had activated. He glanced down at Olivia, and the 3 K9s huddled against her. Not on my watch. He shifted his stance, shielding them from the wind. The storm continued its assault. Somewhere far away, a dispatcher rerouted patrol units toward the vague signal they received. Somewhere deeper in the yard, unseen, someone sat behind the wheel of that truck, watching, plotting, waiting for the cold to finish what they started. Ethan calculated 3 priorities with the ruthless clarity of a man who'd had to make life or death calls before. Keep them alive, get help, and find whoever had intended to erase a police officer in a storm. And the first move was his. Wind battered the narrow gap between the containers, but Ethan forced Olivia and the 3 K9s further into the tight space, using his body to block the worst of the cold. The storm shrieked above them like metal tearing in half, but here, crammed between steel walls, it was survivable. Olivia's breathing remained thin and shallow, her head resting against the thermal blanket that Ethan had wrapped around her. Rex, older, broader, his sable coat dusted with frost, pulled himself upright and stood like a weather-beaten statue, shielding Olivia from stray gusts with the last of his strength. Bolt, lean and restless, even half-frozen, started sniffing the air, alert but weak. Scout pressed his small body against Olivia's thigh, trying to give her every ounce of warmth he had left. Ethan ripped open another chemical warmer, shoved it under Olivia's coat at her ribs, and forced her to drink warm water from his flask. Hypothermia had a cruel logic. The body shut down heat to the limbs to protect the brain and heart. Ethan had seen soldiers slip away quietly on mountains in Afghanistan. The cold was a liar. It whispered, "Just sleep," and people listened. "Not her," he muttered, voice low but fierce. He checked her pulse, not strong, not steady, but present. Olivia didn't know his name. She didn't know the man holding her was the reason she still had a pulse. Ethan didn't need her to know. Saving strangers was something he never questioned. The same wasn't true for trusting people. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to push the thought away. Trusting had never gone well, not since the mission in Kandahar. His chest tightened at the memory of a teammate whose hesitation cost them a life. That was the night Ethan learned, you save who you can and don't look back at the rest. He looked at Olivia. "You're in my hands now. I don't lose people." Olivia stirred weakly, her lips forming a silent word he couldn't understand. He leaned closer. "Olivia, stay awake." Her lashes fluttered, but she didn't open her eyes. He glanced toward the opening of the narrow corridor of metal. He needed to try the radio again. He clicked it on, static. He turned the antenna, shifted his angle, tried again. "Officer down. Severe hypothermia. 3 K9s alive but weakening. Request immediate." The radio crackled to life, half a syllable breaking through. Ethan froze. A faint voice. "Opie? Identify." He squeezed the transmit button. "This is..." The radio died completely, battery drained. The silence afterward felt crushing, as if the storm swallowed hope before it could form. He forced himself to remain calm. Panic wasted oxygen and time. He reached under Olivia's coat, pressing his palm over the warmer to ensure good placement. She needed a stable core temperature before he could risk moving her. Rex nudged Ethan's hand with his nose, anxious, almost commanding. Ethan followed the dog's line of sight and saw movement through the snow. A figure. A vehicle hood. Lights dimmed, barely visible through the sheets of white. Ethan's body tensed. Not the same truck from earlier, different height, different angle, emergency-grade lights. At the same time, miles away, an alarm beeped inside the communications room of the Denver Police Communications Center, where a single dispatcher stared at her monitor. Karen Wilcox, mid-40s, compact and sharp as a razor, had a habit of leaning forward when she worked, as if proximity to the screen sharpened her instincts. Her dark hair was tied back in a bun, and her navy blue uniform showed the marks of long shifts, lint, faded fabric, slightly wrinkled collar. Karen was known in the department as someone who never ignored her gut. Tonight, her gut was screaming. A faint SOS-like signal blinked on her panel again. It wasn't a distress code, just a carrier ping, repeated, weak. It didn't match any staff pattern. "Don't tell me I'm chasing a ghost," she muttered. She adjusted the receiver gain, isolating the anomaly. The signal pulsed a third time, and her heart kicked. This was no random interference. It was a radio dying under extreme cold. A unit in trouble. Karen sucked in a tight breath. "All units, we might have a distress signal off Highway 70 near the industrial yard. Be advised, possible hypothermia event." She hit a button. A map unfolded on her secondary monitor, showing a tiny light pulsing erratically. Someone's out there. She pressed another switch, routed the call to the one person who needed to know. Sheriff Ava Rodriguez. Ava entered the room seconds later. Early 40s, Latina, tall and powerfully built. Hair cut in a sharp bob. Warmth in her voice, but steel in her spine. Years on the job carved permanent grooves of concentration around her eyes. She had a reputation. She never delayed when a life hung in the balance. Karen pointed at the blinking beacon on her screen. Someone attempted a distress call. Battery died mid-transmission. Triangulation shows the industrial yard. Ava's jaw clenched. She didn't like coincidences. Send units, EMTs too, and warm up the K9 recovery team, just in case. Back in the container alley, Ethan waited with a soldier's patience. The snow had eased just enough that he could hear engine sound approaching. He pressed his ear against the metal container wall. It vibrated faintly. Rex gave a low rumble deep in his chest. Bolt stood, weak but alert. Scout wagged his tail once. "Easy," Ethan whispered. He peered through the narrow space, just enough visibility to catch the faint blur of red-blue emergency lights. Ethan didn't wave, didn't shout. Not until he knew. There were two kinds of headlights in situations like this, rescuers and finishers. If the wrong people had returned, revealing himself could doom them all. Olivia's head shifted against his arm. Her voice was fragile, breathy, barely there. "They came back." "No," Ethan whispered. "Different truck, different sound. These people aren't hiding." The vehicle door slammed. Flashlight beams sliced the storm. Ethan recognized the movement. Slow sweeps, deliberate grid search, department technique. His pulse finally loosened its grip on his spine. Ethan emerged from between the containers just enough to be seen. "Rescue team," a voice answered, male, loud, but controlled. "Police, show your hands." Ethan did, palms spread. Two officers pushed through the snow. One was a tall man in his early 30s, blonde buzz cut, square jaw, eyes sharp behind fogging glasses. Deputy Marcus Mack Riley, built like a linebacker, but his expression radiated concern rather than aggression. Behind him was EMT Jenna Price, a petite black woman with soft brown eyes and a no-nonsense efficiency. Avery's quick glance revealed she carried a trauma pack nearly half her size. Ethan jerked his chin toward the narrow corridor. "Officer down. Severe hypothermia. 3 dogs too." Jenna moved immediately, her voice steady, controlled. "Guide me." For a moment, Ethan let himself feel it. Relief. The kind that hit the heart like heat after freezing. They transferred Olivia onto a stretcher, wrapping her in multiple thermal layers and heat packs. The K9s followed, Rex on his feet now, Bolt limping, Scout carried in Mac's arms like a child. Ethan watched all 4 disappear into the swirling snow towards safety. He didn't follow. He stayed behind in the storm, eyes narrowed at the endless rows of containers. He had felt it. The blizzard had teeth, but the danger wasn't only nature. Somewhere out there, hidden by white, was the truck that wasn't rescuing anyone. He whispered into the wind, as if addressing the man behind those headlights. "I saw you." He didn't add the rest, "and I'm coming for you." The emergency lights faded into the storm, as the rescue team disappeared with Olivia and the 3 K9s. Ethan remained behind, the blizzard clawing at him, but he didn't care. Every instinct told him that whoever had tried to kill Olivia might still be watching, waiting for the chance to eliminate loose ends. He scanned the container rows again, forcing his breath to slow. His pulse steadied, combat calm. He turned to leave, to follow the rescue convoy back to the road, when something brushed his leg. Bolt, the Belgian Malinois, stood beside him, trembling but conscious, eyes bright with intent. Bolt was lean, angular, muscles taut even after hypothermia. Unlike Rex's calm authority or Scout's innocence, Bolt had a sharp, almost stubborn boldness. He took a step, then another, glanced back at Ethan, and gave a short, low bark, not fearful, but insistent. Ethan frowned. "You want something." Bolt trotted deeper into the maze of containers. Ethan hesitated only long enough to check his surroundings, then followed. Bolt weaved between steel walls like he had memorized the layout. When they reached a dead corner, Bolt stopped, pressed his paw against a container wall, then scratched at snow piled at the base. Ethan knelt, brushed aside layers of icy powder, and froze. Beneath the snow was a corner of a tarp, industrial-grade, khaki-colored, stiff with frost. Ethan pulled harder, revealing a buried police vehicle, Olivia's patrol SUV. The windows were fogged from the inside, and snow had been shoveled strategically against the doors to hide any sign that the vehicle existed. Someone had hidden it deliberately, not wind, not accident, intent. Ethan tried the back latch, locked. He smashed his elbow against the glass. It didn't budge, built to withstand riots. He crouched lower and smashed again, angling the strike toward the edge, where glass was weakest. The window cracked, spiderwebbing. Bolt pressed closer, as if giving approval. Ethan used his multi-tool to chip a hole large enough to reach inside. He unlocked the rear hatch and opened it. Warmth puffed out. Stored emergency blankets, sealed in airtight packets. Inside the compartment were 2 wool rescue blankets, a trauma medical kit, water packs, and, most important, a spare radio battery. Ethan turned toward Bolt. "You just saved your handler's life." The dog's tail thumped once. He grabbed the kit and blanket and secured them inside his jacket to keep the battery from freezing. The wind carried a faint sound. Not storm, not machinery. Voices. Ethan ducked instinctively, flattening in himself against the side of the SUV. Bolt mirrored him, muscles coiled. 2 men approached, silhouettes blurred through the curtain of snow. Ethan listened to their footsteps, slow, cautious, predatory. The first voice was low, rough, threaded with arrogance. Truck's lights passed twice. If the cop was dead, animals would be stiff by now. The second man sounded younger, uncertainty woven through his tone. "Should we check?" The rough voice scoffed. "We don't check, we vanish." Ethan watched through a narrow gap between the door and container wall. The first man, tall, burly, wearing a thick hunting jacket, had a face that looked built for violence. Heavy beard, broken nose, eyes dulled by cruelty. The younger one was skinnier, restless, constantly adjusting his gloves, not hardened, just caught in the wrong orbit. Bolt growled silently, fur rising. Ethan's pulse lowered further, control, calculation. If they found Olivia's SUV exposed, they'd know someone had interfered. The older man yanked a tarp from a nearby stack. "Cover that window, no evidence." The younger one hesitated. What if someone saw the truck? "Then someone dies," the older snapped. Ethan didn't breathe. Neither did Bolt. The younger one kicked snow over tire tracks. "I thought you said she'd freeze fast. Why tie her instead of—" The older man grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into a container. "Because bodies in snow get found, but hypothermia? Nature does the cleaning." He dropped the kid roughly. "Stop asking questions." They vanished into the storm, footsteps fading. Ethan stayed still for several seconds, letting silence settle, then exhaled once. Bolt nudged his knee, as if asking what now. Ethan grabbed the spare radio battery and shoved it into the radio he'd taken from Olivia's vest. He twisted the knob. Static crackled, then a real channel tone. He pressed transmit. "This is Ethan Miller, Navy SEAL. Officer Olivia Brooks is alive. 3 K9s alive. Coordinates unknown, but—" A voice cut in. "Repeat. Did you say Olivia Brooks? We lost contact 2 hours ago." Ethan recognized the voice, not Karen, not the dispatch operator. This one held command. Sheriff Nora Beckett. Nora, early 50s, tall and angular, short silver hair that made her look carved from determination. She had a presence that could silence an argument with a single look. She sounded controlled, but there was urgency beneath the steel. Ethan answered. Yes, she's being transported by rescue team. I'm still on scene. She was intentionally abandoned. Silence. Sharp, calculated, dangerous. Abandoned or attempted murder. Ethan looked at the SUV buried under tarp and snow. You don't hide a vehicle if you expect survivors. A pause. Then Nora spoke, low and lethal. Stay put. My units are en route. Ethan shut off the radio to conserve battery. He wrapped the medkit inside his jacket and headed back toward where Olivia and the other K9s had been loaded moments before. He moved with Bolt pressed against his thigh, guiding him. The wind built again, snow swirling like smoke. For a moment, Ethan thought he saw headlights again through the fence line. Faint, far, then gone. Bolt stiffened, but didn't bark. This time Ethan didn't chase the shadow. The battery was in place. Olivia was in capable hands. The enemy now knew someone had interfered. They would either disappear or retaliate. Ethan looked down at Bolt. We're not done. The storm swallowed the words, but Bolt understood. The dog leaned into Ethan's side, silent, eyes burning with resolve. The storm thickened until the entire container yard looked like an unfinished sketch. Lines blurred, shapes indistinguishable, light swallowed by shifting white. Ethan held his stance beside Bolt, body angled, weight balanced on the balls of his feet. The spare radio battery had bought them a chance, and Sheriff Nora's units were now moving toward them. But there was a sensation crawling up Ethan's spine, the sense of being watched. Bolt sensed it too. His ears pricked forward, spine stiff, breath visible in short, sharp bursts. Scout and Rex, now back from the transport team, temporarily left in Ethan's care while Olivia was stabilized, stood shoulder to shoulder. Their formation wasn't accidental. It was instinct drilled into them through years of training. Protect handler, protect partner, protect the pack. Then came the sound. Deep, growling. Not animal, mechanical. It sliced through the storm like a blade. A truck engine, heavy-duty diesel, moving slow, deliberate, no urgency in its rumble. Ethan ducked behind the edge of a container wall and peered out. The headlights appeared first, twin white beams cutting a path through the chaos. But something was different. The lights didn't sweep randomly like earlier. Now they moved slowly, knowingly, as if they already suspected someone had interfered. The truck rolled into the open stretch where Olivia had been tied. Its paint was matte black, coated in a thin layer of frost. A dent across the front bumper as though it had pushed through something earlier. The tires were thick, built for off-road terrain. Not a delivery vehicle, not a worker. This truck belonged to someone who liked disappearing. The engine cut. Silence settled, except for the slapping wind. The driver's door swung open. A man stepped down, boots hitting the snow with a heavy thud. He was tall, at least 6'2", with a thick build that implied brute force rather than training. The harsh beams illuminated him from behind, throwing his features into shadow, but as he stepped forward, the lighting shifted. His face appeared through the wind. Early 40s, square jaw under a weeks-old bristle of beard, pale eyes that were disturbingly calm. This man didn't feel fear, he carried it. His coat was a charcoal tactical parka, unbranded, the type bought with cash. His gloves were leather, flexible for gripping. Ethan had met men like him overseas. Men who operated on the fringe of law and morality. Men who didn't lose sleep over what happened to others. He scanned the snow where Olivia had been tied. Well, he muttered, voice gravel dry, where the hell are the bodies? He took 3 more steps, inspecting the disturbed snow. There was no panic on his face, only calculation. Another door opened. A second man climbed down, shorter, early 30s, slender frame, nervous posture. He wore a beanie pulled low, a patched ski jacket, and his eyes darted to every sound as though expecting punishment for making a wrong move. This was Kyle Dawson, not by birth, but by circumstance. The thin scar across his eyebrow hinted at a past of bad decisions. He carried a folded tarp, the same tarp that had covered Olivia's patrol car. We should go. They're gone. Someone took them. His voice trembled. Ethan could hear how the kid's sentences always ended like a question. Uncertain. Insecure. The older man didn't even look at him. Shut up. They didn't walk out on their own. Someone helped them. That means someone's still here. Kyle swallowed hard. Maybe we should talk less. The big man cut him off sharply, like swatting a fly. The dogs reacted first. Rex stepped forward, hackles raised, planting himself between the men and the narrow space that led to Olivia's rescue route. Bolt positioned himself next, sharp eyes locked on the intruders. Scout, smallest but fearless, inched closer, emitting a soft rumbling growl. Ethan crouched, hand on Bolt's collar, not to restrain him, but to steady him. "Easy," he breathed, not blinking. "We wait." The big man spotted them. His smile was slow, cruel. "Well now," he murmured, "looks like the mutts are still breathing." He took a step closer. Bolt's growl deepened. Ethan angled slightly, placing himself at the dog's flank. Silent, calculating. The man's brows lifted when he spotted Ethan's silhouette. "And you're not one of ours." Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. The man smirked. "You're either a fool or a dead man." He reached behind his back, hands slipping beneath his coat. Before Ethan could react, Scout barked, sharp, loud, just as red-blue emergency lights burst through the wall of snow. Sirens didn't wail in the blizzard, they choked on ice, but the lights blazed like salvation. 2 police SUVs plowed into view, snow spraying beneath their tires. The big man cursed, spun, bolted toward his truck. The nervous one, Kyle, froze, like prey caught in headlights. "Move!" the big man roared. Kyle jolted and scrambled to the passenger door. The truck engine roared to life. Bolt lunged, but Ethan grabbed his harness. "No, they want you to chase." The truck reversed, fish-tailed, then vanished into the swirling storm like a beast retreating into the forest. Moments later, police officers rushed toward Ethan, K9s, and the narrow shelter between the containers. Leading them was Officer Jordan Hale, mid-30s, fit but not bulky. Dark skin, close-cut hair, eyes sharper than his calm voice implied. He worked differently from others, observing everything first before speaking. "You're the SEAL?" he asked. Ethan nodded once. Jordan extended a gloved hand, not in greeting, but in solidarity. "You kept them alive." He turned to the dogs, lowering to one knee to let Rex sniff his glove. "Good work, boys." Behind him, EMTs rushed by with equipment, scanning the ground for signs of additional victims. Ethan's radio crackled. "Miller, this is Sheriff Beckett. Olivia is stable. We're prepping K9 warming crates now. Status on threat." Ethan spoke without hesitation. Truck fled. 2 males, one dominant, trained, the other scared. They'll try to erase their trail. Nora's voice came back like steel. "Then we tighten theirs." Rex nudged Ethan's leg, not anxious, waiting. The storm began to die down, the wind shifting direction. For the first time since Ethan saw Olivia tied to that pole, he allowed himself to feel something beyond survival instinct. Rex rested his head against Ethan's hip. Bolt brushed his nose against Ethan's hand. Scout leaned in, trembling but determined. They weren't just trained animals. They were soldiers, partners, survivors. Ethan looked at the tracks left by the fleeing truck, deep grooves carving through the white powder, the kind of tracks that didn't vanish quickly. "They think the storm will save them," he muttered. Jordan adjusted his grip on his rifle strap. "They don't know what's coming." Ethan turned toward the lights approaching through the storm. "Neither do they." The storm lifted the next morning, like a curtain pulled away. Denver emerged bruised and pale, streets covered in uneven layers of snow that glimmered under early sunlight. The world that nearly drowned Olivia Brooks in white silence was suddenly gentle, as if apologizing. Inside Denver Regional Hospital, fluorescent lights hummed quietly while heating vents pushed a dry warmth into the recovery wing. Olivia lay on a bed near the window, wrapped in blankets, an IV line feeding fluid into her veins. Her skin held more color now, though a faint tremor still passed through her fingertips. She opened her eyes slowly, adjusting to the bright room. A monitor beeped steadily beside her, every beat an argument against the night. At the foot of the bed stood Sheriff Nora Beckett, late 40s, tall, shoulders squared with a natural command presence. Deep lines framed her mouth, a result of years of fighting battles she never asked for. Her short silver hair looked sharp against her tan skin, and her dark brown eyes held the penetrating gaze of someone who never accepted half-truths. Nora didn't speak yet. She just studied Olivia, as if confirming that the woman before her was truly alive. On the left sat Dr. Simon Reed, mid-30s, slender with soft sandy blonde hair, and circular glasses that kept sliding down the bridge of his nose. He specialized in trauma medicine, known for calm hands and a surprisingly gentle voice. He carried himself with steady patience, the kind cultivated after losing too many patients in emergency rooms. He checked Olivia's vitals with methodical precision. Olivia blinked, throat dry. "How long?" Dr. Reed handed her a cup of warm water. 8 hours since the rescue. You're stable." Nora stepped forward, Her voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. "Brooks, do you remember who did this?" Memory hit Olivia like a sudden fist. Snow, zip ties biting into her wrists, the coarse laughter of men she never saw clearly. She swallowed. 2 men. They ambushed me at the industrial yard. Said something about cleaning up loose ends. Nora's eyes narrowed. "Did you hear names?" Olivia nodded. "Devon." The older one called the other Kyle. Nora inhaled sharply, jaw tightening. She knew that name. Mike Devon, former K9 handler fired 2 years ago for excessive force and falsified training reports. He vanished afterward, slipping into the shadow economy around illegal animal fighting circuits. Nora had spent months trying to prove Devon was involved in underground dog trafficking, but there was never enough evidence. Until now. Olivia continued. "He tied me to the pole. He said the cold would do the work. He knew I wouldn't be found." Rage flickered in Nora's eyes. Not loud rage, cold, tactical. "Not only attempted murder," she whispered. "He's running something larger." Olivia looked toward the window. "There was a warehouse. I saw part of a logo before. They blindfolded me. Red paint. A big letter A." Nora turned to Dr. Reed. "How long before she can be checked out?" Reed lifted a brow. "Physically, 18 hours. Mentally," he exhaled, "no one walks away from nearly freezing to death without scars." Olivia held Nora's gaze. "I'm not sitting in a bed while those dogs are suffering." Her tone was soft, but unshakable. Nora recognized that steel. "All right, but you follow orders." Down in the hospital's temporary K9 recovery unit, Ethan stood beside Rex, Bolt, and Scout. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet fur. Heat lamps cast warm amber light over each dog's crate. Ethan leaned on the counter with crossed arms, a bandage wrapped around his forearm where he'd caught a sharp edge of metal during the rescue. He looked tired but wired, jaw unshaven, clothes still showing traces of snow melt. Beside him, Marissa Clark, the department's lead canine rehabilitation specialist, checked Scout's IV. Marissa was in her late 30s, petite but radiating energy. Her curly dark hair was tied up, and she wore glasses too big for her narrow face. She was known for her fierce protection of animals and her impossibly sharp tongue toward anyone who mistreated them. "Rex is stabilizing," she muttered, scribbling notes. "Bolt's stubborn. It helps. Scout's young, but he's fighting." Ethan slid a hand along Bolt's head, the dog pushing into the touch. "They protected her," he said quietly. "They shouldn't have had to." Marissa's voice softened. "Then let's make sure the monsters who did this don't get another chance." Meanwhile, upstairs, Nora's team analyzed the dashcam footage Ethan recovered from the buried patrol SUV. Officers gathered in a briefing room. On the wall screen froze a low-resolution image, a red-painted warehouse door with a large slanted letter A, exactly matching Olivia's memory. "Location?" Nora asked. Tech analyst James Klein, a thin man in his 20s with pale skin and nervous energy, clicked through satellite maps. He specialized in digital forensics, more comfortable with screens than people. This warehouse was abandoned after a fire 3 years ago. Utility bills show sudden activity this month. Heat turned on, overnight power spikes consistent with refrigeration units. Every officer stiffened. "Refrigeration?" Nora repeated. James swallowed. "Illegal animal holding. Cold keeps the smell down so neighbors don't notice." Marissa, who had just entered the room, froze mid-step. "Bastards," Nora pointed to the map. "Gear up. We raid tonight." Hours later, the blizzard died completely. The temperature rose just enough to loosen the compacted snow into slush. The team traveled in a silent convoy, 3 unmarked SUVs followed by an animal rescue van. Ethan rode in the back beside Rex and Bolt, both fitted with tactical harnesses. Scout sat between them, trembling, not from cold but anticipation. Ethan rubbed Scout's ears. "One more fight, then this ends." Scout licked his hand softly, as if in agreement. They reached the warehouse at 11:14 p.m. Nora led them toward a side entrance. "No heroics. We breach, we secure, we recover." Ethan stayed silent. He had no badge, just instinct and purpose. Nora gave the signal. "Go." The battering ram hit the lock. The door snapped, slamming inward. A rush of stench hit them. Urine, rust, and fear. The sound followed, barking, Dozens of terrified voices. The officers swept room by room. Crates lined the walls, each holding dogs in varying states of neglect. Injured, scarred, malnourished. Marissa dropped to her knees. Oh my God! Ethan unclipped Rex and Bolt. Find him! Rex lowered his head, nostrils flaring. Bolt's stance shifted, focused, primal. They moved like detectives on four legs. Down the last corridor, Bolt stopped. Rex growled. Nora kicked the door open. Inside stood Mike Devon. He turned, shock twisting his face. Bolt lunged first, grabbing Devon's jacket and pinning him against the wall. Rex stood beside him, teeth bared, a warning. Officers restrained Devon while Kyle Dawson cowered in the corner, pale and shaking. I didn't want this, he whispered. Nora's voice was cold. You helped him, she nodded at Ethan. Cuff them. Devon spat. They're just dogs. Ethan stepped closer. Not tonight. Weeks later, winter melted. Snow gave way to grass, and the city thawed. Olivia walked across a fenced training yard behind the K9 facility. Rex trotted on her right, Bolt on her left. Scout bounded ahead, full of young energy. Ethan leaned against the fence, arms crossed, watching with a quiet smile. Olivia met his eyes across the yard, warmth replacing the terror that once lived there. He stayed. She healed. The dogs found a home. 4 souls rescued from a storm built a new beginning, one not of survival, but belonging. In a world that often rushes past pain, the true miracles are not thunder or lightning, but quiet acts of courage. One person stopping in the cold, one hand refusing to let another life slip away. Sometimes God doesn't part the sea. Sometimes he sends a stranger in a storm, a soldier with a flashlight, a dog who refuses to give up. And maybe, just maybe, the miracle isn't the rescue. It's the reminder that we are never alone, even in our darkest night. When life feels like a blizzard and you see no way through, remember Olivia, Ethan, and those 3 brave K9s. Remember that storms don't last, and that God can use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. So, as you leave this story and return to your own life, be the one who stops, who notices, who chooses kindness. You never know. You might be someone's answered prayer. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment about a moment when God sent someone to you, or when you were that person for someone else. And don't forget to subscribe, because every story here carries the same message. Miracles still happen, and God blesses those who bless others. May God watch over you, guide you, and place warmth in your heart, even in the coldest storm. God bless you.